This is the start of my animation process. I began by positioning Wally's arms, neck and head in the position I wanted the animation to start with, which was with his arms pointing forward as far back in the sliding part as possible, his hands closed and his eyes in a flat position, as I wanted the start of the animation to be like his reboot sequence in the film. I began by adjusting his arms and hands, and then I started to adjust the neck and head. The neck and head were a bit more awkward to adjust, as I was not too sure which way the neck should be positioned, bearing in mind I was also trying to stick to the constraints of the Lego model. After setting the model in the starting position, I started to create the keyframes for the movement of his eyes, starting with his right eye. I animated each eye to start at separate times, with the right eye animating to flat and then the left eye rotating. When both were back to flat, I animated both rotating to their extents. I did this as I believed this was the best way to start animation. As previously mentioned, I wanted the start of my animation to be similar to the reboot sequence in the film. I wanted him to then lower his arms and turn away from the camera towards the left of the frame. Using rotation keyframes, I first positioned his arms down to just above his tracks. When I first did this, I noticed that the hands were clipping through the tracks. To correct this, I animated his hands rotating around so as to prevent the clipping of the hands and tracks. As this part of the animation was both arms moving at the same time, I used whole numbers to set the basic parts of the animation on both sides. The angle I used to begin with was about 35 degrees along the x-axis. I then tweaked the one side so it was closer to the tracks and then copied that angle to the other side. After some adjustments of the arms, I animated them looking towards the left and then towards the right. At this time I also began to animate him turning away from the camera before his head was back to its original position, so there was a bit of follow through with his looking left and right. Doing this turn also meant having to animate the tracks to match the speed and angle of rotation. If I was to do anything with tank tracks again, I would ensure that I have correctly set them up using wire parameters, so that the animation of the tank tracks is accurate to the movement of the body in the scene. As, at the time of rendering and compositing, I noticed that a bit of sliding was occurring within the animation of the tracks. This couldn't be fixed, as render times were too long. To fix would mean re-rigging the tracks, which would involve re-rendering the whole scene, and any tutorial for tank tracks I looked at only seemed to work in one direction and didn't go into rigging for the rotation of the tank.